research from a behavioral science angle. This means that we do a lot of desk, but more importantly, field studies, especially in Africa. That is where you find your real truths, and through that we try to establish what barriers and what barriers basically withheld people from acting in a certain way, and how we can influence them through psychological principles and towards the desired behavior. We help companies to form their marketing strategy, and then lastly we create campaigns together with freelancers, all within those 4 pillars. And what I want to talk about today, before we get into Captain Fanplastic and get into like the power of storytelling and the power of gamification to stimulate an audience to do better in this world, I want to explain a little bit my background. And let me just see if I can. I'm sorry, shouldn't click there. 1 second. Yes. I'm just trying to. Give me 1 second. Just want to get this out of the way. Okay. I hope you can see this. Okay. So first, before we get into Captain Fanplastic, I want to talk about 2 very influential professors within behavioral science, and to give you a bit of a background on how behavioral design works. So the guy at the top is called Daniel Kahneman, and he's basically the godfather of behavioral economics or behavioral science. And beneath you, B.J. Fogg. Mr. Kahneman is known for a book he wrote. I can really recommend it to you. It's called Thinking Fast and Slow, where he talks about the decisions we make in our lives. And if you are an economist, I don't know if there are economists in this webinar, but if you're an economist, you always learn at high school that, or sorry, at university that people are rational and that they want to maximize their own utility. So the reason why they do this in economics is that otherwise it's very hard to predict people's behavior on a macro level. But Daniel Kahneman, from a more behavioral point of view, challenges that and be really individual. Only 5% of his decisions are made rational, and 95% of his decisions are made irrationally. So obviously, for some people, it will be more who are more rational person. Other people, it will be less who more work from an intuitive point of view. But in general, that's the average. So you can imagine that if economics would adopt this, they would not be able to predict on a very large scale what certain legislations or certain implications from varying from governments to companies, what kind of effect that would have. So Daniel Kahneman doesn't challenge that, but what he says is, like, if you really want to create for a smaller audience and you really want to understand how these people behave, you have to assume that most of their decisions are made irrationally. And that can go, for example, from walking over the street and seeing a robot and automatically you stop because the robot says it's red. And if you would be rational, you would think, why is this actually red? Why did they pick this color? Maybe you might think there are no cars here. Why did they place this robot? And you start over analyzing this, but actually this doesn't happen because you're just drilled. Your intuition says like, no, it's red, so I have to stop, right? So what Kahneman says is that you basically have 2 systems that operate your decision making. You have your system 1, which is your intuition, and your system 2, which is your rational self. And so your system 1 operates basically 95% of all your decisions. And your system 2 only does that for 5% of the decisions you make. And how these 2 systems interplay is, you can think of it like this, like me walking over the street, seeing the robot being on red, my system 1 signals to me straight away, you've seen this before, so you stop. Maybe if I haven't seen it before, it would send a message to system 2 to say like, is it something you want to think about? Or maybe the color is different, so you're like, it's like kind of orange red, so you don't really know what to do. But then your system 2 basically decides if he wants to like turn that belief that you have in system 1, or the suggestion, sorry, into a belief. But often what happens is that your system 2 sends it back to your system 1 and says like, I don't want to think about this. So yes, these two systems interplay constantly on a daily basis. You can do like these small little exercises with yourself where you can test yourself to operate those systems like at the same time. For instance, if you're running, basically you're running because you know how to run. So your system 1 is like able to do this on their own, right? But what happens, like if you start thinking about stuff or start to challenge yourself with difficult questions, or for example, difficult math exercise, you'll notice that you stop running and you start walking. And the reason for that is that your system 2, your rational self, now is taking over and needs a lot of thinking power to analyze or to solve for the question or the exercise you gave yourself. And before that, it was not doing anything, so your system 1 was just running and doing its thing. But there's these, you must have noticed this in your life sometimes, where you do one thing which is easy, and then you do something else which is hard, but then you notice that when it gets too hard, you stop doing the one thing. So that's like a nice way of seeing how these two things interplay. So basically that also explains to us why we do have these systems, right? Because it's basically to give people shortcuts in their decision making that are generally reasonable and good decisions. Because imagine if you would be fully rational, as economists say. Imagine about how many things you should think about and question, and why it's there, and why you're doing it always like that. So that's why there are these two systems, and you have to be very thankful that you have a system 1 that is your gut, your intuition, that operates for you. So that's what Daniel Kahneman is writing about. I can definitely advise you to read his book. Then talking about B.J. Fogg, and B.J. Fogg is known for the B.J. Fogg model, which talks about behavior. And he created a formula for behavior: B is met, saying B is met. So it basically says behavior is motivation times ability times trigger. And he created the following graph, and that you can see on the right of your screen for this. So he basically says like a certain behavior happens when your motivation is high enough, the ability, so how easy it is to do that behavior, is high enough, and you're triggered at the right moment. So I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but everything left of the line inside of the graph is where no behavior happens. And everything inside the line, so where the letter T is written, where the trigger is, there's where behavior happens. So when your motivation is high enough up and your ability is high enough up, you end up into this area where your trigger works. If your motivation is too low or your ability is too low, then you're in an area where your triggers don't work, so behavior doesn't happen. This model is a great way of starting any, can be organizational, can be governmental, can be personal challenge, in your life. And obviously people need to be involved, because where there's people, there's behavior, and where there's behavior, there's often a certain behavior that is happening at the moment, so status quo, and a desired behavior where you want to move towards, or where you want to move people towards, right? So why this model works very well is that it gives you in an instant an indication of where you need to focus on. Maybe the motivation of your audience is not high enough for the behavior that you want them to do, or maybe it's just too hard for them to do it, right? If you want people to recycle, they might be super motivated, but maybe there are no bins in place, or there's not a logistical system around it in place, which makes it for them super far to drop off their recycled materials. And then what happens is that the motivation might be high enough, but the ability is too low, so the behavior doesn't happen. And the trigger that you put in place, and maybe you give them an SMS at a certain moment, you send them an email or anything, it won't work because the ability is not high enough. What I would like to add is that for the trigger, it talks about triggering your 5 senses, okay? So you have sight, scent, your hearing, your taste, and your touch. And those are all 5 ways to trigger somebody, right? If you tap somebody on his back to ask him something, you're basically triggering him. Or when a bakery is sending out a scent of freshly baked croissants, he's triggering you through scent. So I'll give you a few examples of how this model works so that you understand it, and hopefully that you can use it in your own practice. So let's talk about the baker, right? When I still was living in Amsterdam, I would cycle to work over the Utrechtsestraat, which is a very busy street. Would be a endangering or a life endangering situation every day, but that's basically how cycling life is in Holland. But sometimes it would be so busy or stressed that I would forget to have breakfast, right? So this baker would see me, who has a little baker shop next to the Utrechtsestraat, would see me cycle by every day. And the current behavior is that I cycle past the shop and I don't buy anything, right? So for him to use this model is to understand how high my motivation is to maybe stop and to buy a croissant, how easy it is for me to stop and to buy the croissant, and if he's triggering me at the right moment. Because when it comes to triggers, it's very important that you find the moment of truth. Keep that in mind. I'll give you an explanation about it later. But so he sees me cycling by, but he wants me basically to change my behavior and to stop and to buy a croissant of him. So what does he do? He does know that in the morning, he knows that he always seen me like cycling very fast, so he sees like I'm stressed, so he could make an assumption that I haven't eaten that morning. But in order to increase the motivation, maybe more of me to stop, he could potentially make the shop in such a way that it would always look very filled up, so that there's a lot of people. Because one of the ways of increasing your motivation is by using social proof. And social proof is basically that when you see a group of people doing something, you are likely to do the same, because in any unfamiliar or new situation, you tend to look to what a group of people are doing. So he creates this line in front of his shop, maybe with his own employees, to fake as if it's running very well. So I'm like, oh, that bakery must be very good, right? Could be a way of influencing and increasing my motivation. Then he's like, okay, but now he sees the line, so it's still not super easy for him to buy something. So what he does is he makes it easier for me, and he creates like an open window where he sells his croissants out of. So it's now open, and for me it's easy to even like stay on my bicycle and just cycle next to the window and just get my fresh croissants. He does another thing to make it easy for me. He uses a program like Zapper or I can't SnapScan, sorry, apologies. That makes it even more quicker for me to buy something from him, because I can just use my phone. And then, like I was saying, then he assumes that the motivation and the ability are now high enough, so he feels that he's in the area where triggers work, and triggers work to change my behavior and to stop my bicycle, right? So what he does is then, like I said, the moment he knows that I'll pass through at 8 or 8:30, whatever, he starts sending out the scent of freshly baked breads, lovely, let's say, Easter spirit buns or croissants, and then he pushes that scent out, and he knows he will trigger me at the right moment. He knows that I will see that the shop is popular and that it has good stuff and that it's like bicycle friendly. So that makes me change my behavior, right? So that is like a way of using this model. I'm sorry to use a bicycle example. It might be building the stigma of Dutch cyclists a little bit, but I can give you another example to explain to you why this graph is curved like that. Because basically what it says is that in certain situations, when your motivation is high enough, but your ability is not that high enough, behavior could still occur. You can still end up in the trigger area where your triggers work. So I can give you the example of Pokemon Go, right? It's also a good example because it shows the power of gamification. So when they aired Pokemon Go, which basically they made Pokemon Go available on your phone with augmented reality. So that means that people could experience the game on the streets, walking around, finding all these rare Pokemons on the street by holding their phone in front of objects. Now, question yourself, if you are a developer and you create that game and you create all these rare Pokemons, but they're only available at certain locations, very hard to find, etc. Do you think the ability is high to play that game and to enjoy it? You would say it's quite low. However, because the game created it actually a real world where people could play in a nostalgic way, the motivation was so high that people would even like hike up Lion's Head to find the rare Pokemon there, right? So that's why the curve of the model is like that. So keep this model in mind and think about, like, because you have all these psychological principles like scarcity, authority, social proof, consistency, liking, you name it, that can influence people to increase their motivation. But you also have other ways, right? Putting incentives in place, or in this case, what I'm going to talk about, storytelling and creating a world and a game that appeals to people that they want to interact with. So I think we took like a half year to develop the program, but in our sustainability pillar, we wanted to create a program that teaches children about the impact of plastic, but also the value. And what we basically did was, and the reason why we wanted to do it was that I think my own generation has lived in a world where everything has been made more and more convenient for us, a lot through plastic packaging. However, we never were taught or educated about what the impact was of that plastic. And children in general are still quite receptive and young, so you can still influence them, and it's easier to change their behavior in a certain way. So adding those things up and seeing like the pollution on all of these beautiful beaches around in the Western Cape, we decided to create a program that would be so fun for children that they would want to interact with plastic, want to learn about it, and feel motivated to change their perception and their way of dealing with plastic. So with the program, we want to contribute to the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, basically reducing pollution in our oceans, and like I said, by raising awareness on the impact of plastic and the value it holds. And to do that, we created a mindset that plastic waste is no trash but treasure, which means is that when you see something laying around, and plastic litter or whatever, you want to pick it up because it shouldn't be there as treasure. It could become something else. So with that mindset, we started working and developing a program that would be creative, that would use storytelling and a certain form of gamification that would really pull children in and allow them to immerse themselves into a world where they want to change their behavior. What we did is that we went to Khayelitsha, one of the bigger townships in Cape Town, and we first had, like I was saying, field studies are very important, and getting a deeper understanding about your audience and what their knowledge was on this specific topic. So we tested their knowledge on plastic, on pollution, on recycling, all these things, and to get like a general idea of what they knew and what they didn't know. We focused on kids from grades 4 to 6 because we felt that it's like the perfect age to truly enjoy stories, become part of a story, and also learn from these stories and see if it can change their behavior. What you can see on the pictures that we used also a collage of all these different pictures and photos to craft their perfect pirate. And in general sense, Captain Fanplastic, but they didn't know that yet. And we asked them also, like, if you were a pirate, what kind of sidekick would you have? And all the kids basically picked a little turtle. So with all that information and the knowledge we gained from the research, we wrote a book, The Legend of Captain Fanplastic, and it talks about how Captain Fanplastic got his name. And it's basically a journey of the captain and his little turtle friend to find a cure for the turtle because Finn became ill. And they go on this journey, and on their way they meet all these animals that are infected by plastic. But it all ends when they shipwreck their boat on a giant plastic island. And then the shell of Finn cracks open and all this plastic erupts. And then the two understand that all these animals and Finn became ill because of plastic. And that is really a part in the story where the moral pops up and children start to understand what the impact of plastic is. And then as our pirates are super positive and happy pirates, they decide to rebuild their ship and rebuild themselves into these plastic warriors. And then the captain finds a cap of a bottle that he can use as an eye patch, and his wooden packet leg can be replaced by the bottom of the bottle. And for Finn, they cut out the bottom of the bottle so that he has his new shell, and then they look at each other and Captain Kirk becomes Captain Fanplastic. And they make this pact together that they're gonna roam the seas in search of a crew that helps them to find all the plastic treasure in the world. So that's where we talk about the value of plastic, and that it actually can still hold a new value, and that it can be interchanged. Also, that there's a monetary value, especially in our world right now. And as they make that pact, obviously they're looking for a crew that can help them, and the crew that are basically the kids. So if you look at our program, it's divided in 4 parts. It starts with the story. I just told it to you in a nutshell. Then there's learning, so they learn about Captain Fanplastic in a Q&A. And then they start to create their own pirate outfits to really become one with the story. What is important during the learning is that we also show real pictures of what is happening in the world, and we use our illustrations in those images to still make the connection with the story. For example, showing a whale that eats a plastic bag, which they also met on their story, so we try to make it more real for the children. And then during the creation, they obviously make their own eye patches that Captain Fanplastic also have, and they make their own little friend, Finn. And then the last exciting part is the cleaning, but in the cleanup, but in their world, it's now a treasure hunt. Treasure hunt to find the most plastic treasure out there. So here you can see basically how we used story and integrated it into our whole program, but also in a way that the children feel that they're playing a part in that story. Because at the beach, they are not there for a cleanup. They're there to prove to Captain Fanplastic that they're worthy to become part of his crew. And you see the excitement of the kids in it. So I think that is super important when you create a story, is that you try to link it in all the different facets of the educational program or whatever you're creating, so that it becomes more and more a reality. So what I want to zoom in on is on the treasure hunt itself, because we put these different mechanics into place to basically stimulate the children even more, right, and to increase their motivation even more, if you talk about the PJ Fogg model. Because we basically said that the pirates that find the most plastic treasure, that they get a Captain Fanplastic hat, and that they, next to the other crew, officially can join Captain Fanplastic. And to elevate that game, we hand out treasure maps, treasure bags, and with those 2 items, they start their treasure hunt, and they basically document everything they find. So we start to build also this valuable data of the type of plastic we find on these different beaches. This was, for example, on Nandi Beach, where you look at the treasure bags. And then after an hour, when basically, because there's so much excitement and so much speed in the treasure hunt, the whole beach is cleaned. We weighed their booty, like you saw in the first image, with old fishing skills. And they write it on the treasure maps, and then we look at who the winner is, and they get their own Captain Fanplastic hat. So what I want to say with this, by putting a story in place, but also putting a certain form of gamification in place, we are able to increase the motivation of these kids towards plastic and towards basically cleaning up, recycling, all these different forms that are attached to the subject. Now I want to talk a little bit about the ability in the trigger, because this picture was just made, and we just went to a school in Athlone, to Bokmakiri Primary School, and we created now a way to also make it easier for kids to keep on being pirates that believe that plastic waste is no trash but treasure. Because we're producing now recycling bins that are treasure chests. So it's again, it links to the story, and it makes these kids not only on the school premises, it makes it more easy for them, so increasing the ability to still being a pirate of Captain Fanplastic, but it also triggers them because it triggers their sight, and when they see it, they put their hand in front of their eyes and they're like, wait a second, I'm a pirate, and I believe that plastic is not trash but treasure, and I'm gonna put it in this treasure chest. And that is a way of like putting a nudge in place, or a hot trigger, how you want to call it, and to keep on influencing kids while we move on to the next school. And through that, we're working on different mechanics to creating sustainable behavior change with these kids we facilitate the program to. As it stands, we started this year. What we see is that with the program in an hour, when we do the treasure hunt, we collect on average 27.5 kilograms of plastic. But we also generate valuable data through the treasure maps, and they hand in at the end. But most importantly, we create an immersive experience that excites the children and changes their behavior towards plastic. Obviously, what is interesting now is to start analyzing the data as well of these treasure chests to see how it's affecting the school and how the children keep on interacting with it. So we're full in that process right now. Talking about the next steps, and that's maybe for the people that are listening, maybe you see a linkage or you see an opportunity. We're focusing on the following goals in 2019. We want to facilitate the program to 50 school classes in South Africa. This means that how it works is that schools either buy the program or they get the program sponsored. Obviously, mostly the last option is used. So for that, we find then South African and international companies that want to fund the program and sponsor it to the schools from a SDG point of view. Then secondly, what we're building is a national ecosystem of facilitators and recycling partners, so that we are able to basically facilitate the program everywhere in South Africa and have recycling partners in place to pick up all the plastic treasure that is found at the end of the cleanup. We are now setting up the Eastern Cape, and that's very exciting. And then what we want also 20 operating treasure chests that have a recycling partner that picks it up and hopefully even can give the school a monetary value. And lastly, we're developing the program for the Netherlands, so it will start also this year. If you see like opportunities as a corporate or as a facilitator or a recycling partner or an organization that works within this, please contact me and we can discuss the opportunities. Thank you so much for listening. It was interesting to present like this, like a monologue, but I hope you enjoyed it, and you can find our contact details in the right top of the screen. And let's keep on working hard to find all the plastic treasure out there. I will say "Arr" on that as a true pirate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruben. That was a great presentation. Thank you for sharing the wonderful work that you have started with Captain Fanplastic. It looks like an amazing program to be implemented. So I'm going to open the floor to any questions. Haley says, excellent, and thank you so much, Ruben, for the presentation as well. So if there are any questions, you can type it in the chat, or you can also just unmute yourself. Under the attendees, you shall see next to your name there's a little microphone, so you can just click on that and unmute. Haley does have another question, or Haley has a question. Have you had any contact with Waste Plan as recyclers, Ruben?
As recycling partner, you mean?
I think so, yes. Yes.
Not yet. We've been working with Plastic SA so far, but if they have a more national coverage, it would be amazing to connect with them. Yeah. Jenny, how can we get copies of the book, please? Yes, so we are in the process of printing them, and I think what we'll do is that, like, what is important, obviously, for us is that we have to protect the CI in a certain way, but we are thinking of opening opening it up in a certain way, like from an e-learning perspective, and seeing how we can empower other organizations or schools directly through online program. The reason why we do it now offline is that when we did our first program, we had all these great intentions of training the teacher with teacher guidelines and all these things, and having like a full scalable online program. And what happened, obviously, which we could have expected, was that teachers are so overworked and they have so little time. So when we rocked up there and ready to just see the teacher provide the whole lesson, she didn't read anything we sent her, and she didn't know anything about the whole thing, which was such a shame. But that made us first focus on training facilitators that can provide it at the schools to relieve the teachers as well. And it's super understandable that it's like that, but we are working towards having it online and finding a way of making it for us still worthwhile to run the program, but also to share it with others. Yeah. Janneke, is the data collected used to address the underlying problems of plastic use? It is collected and we file it online. I think we are not like, that is something obviously where we really want to work towards. So we have these beautiful treasure maps that showcase all the different plastic the kids found. So we compile that, we have it in print, and we try to put it online. But like making a hypothesis out of it, or like working together with an organization that, for example, can say like, in Millington we found a lot of this type of plastic. Where does it come from? Is it from boats that dump it, or is it washed up from rivers, whatever? We're not there yet, but obviously it's something we really want to go towards, because it's something I think very valuable we have in the program as well. I hope that answers you. And if you know, or if you are in a capacity of somebody who is interested in that and who could start to work on the data, send me an email, obviously. Carmen. Okay, cool. That's a nice compliment. I can only concur with that. Okay, I see also your follow-up, Janneke. Yes, so like I was saying, we are not there yet to say like, okay, after these programs, we can make these conclusions about these beaches, but very, very interested in going into that space, yes.
And then, Ruben, we have a question from Lexi from our office. Hi, Ruben.
Yes.
Thank you so much for the presentation. It was really, really good and really insightful. My question is, we love the graph that you showed, the B equals MAT, and the analysis of how to get behavioral change. But I just want to know on how you measure successful behavior change from that process. What are the techniques or the ways that you use to assess successful behavioral change?
Yeah, very good question. So I didn't stipulate that maybe enough, but I think that model that you saw there is a very good starting point for starting your design process or your human-centered design or whatever you're doing. And it's a good indicator to see like, oh, do we have to focus on the ability, or do we have to focus on motivation, or are we triggering our people in the wrong way or in the wrong place, time, etc. But it's not to go deeper into behavioral change. You have different models for that. So for example, one we use a lot is a persuasion matrix, which allows you to divide basically the customer journey you want your audience to go through in 3 steps, from initial consideration to active evaluation to moment of conversion, the behavior you want to pull out of people. And obviously there, what you do there is that you basically do, I think you call it in English, a baseline measurement. And then you have these different steps that you create. You create your persuasion matrix around towards the conversion, and then you compare the results, obviously. When it comes to Captain Fanplastic, I think that is also something like going, for example, today back to the Bokmakiri school and seeing like all the children run up to us with one hand covering one eye, still believing that they were pirates, showcases us that they are still living, or that they still are connected to the story. But I think the biggest challenge for us now as well is like we have the impact from the cleanup, but to establish the educational impact, and for example, with the treasure bins, we also have again qualitative insights, but to get quantitative, more like quantitative insights, and on how the educational impact is, that is something we're building now, because the challenge there is to, you go to the school, our program is, if we do it right, is 4 hours. So to have then, to integrate then like a baseline management and afterwards also one measurement cannot be really done in that program. So what we're now working at, or it can be done, but we just have to see how we can do it in a playful but effective way, and that is what we're developing now. But to answer your question, very long answer, is you can use obviously A/B testing, you can use baseline measurements, and to do like a proper design challenge, you would have several steps, and for every step you would look at the current behavior, and you will set like a certain end, so number of people you want to put in your audience or your base audience and your test audience, and then start to compare their behavior on a certain time length, if that answers your question.
Alexi's giving me the thumbs up, so yes, it does. Thank you so much for that. Okay, I can't see any other questions coming into the chat. I guess just a quick question from my end, Ruben. I'm not sure if you did mention it, but do you do regular visits to the schools after you run the Captain Fanplastic program initially for that 4 hours? Do you go back and continue the education program?
Yeah, so I think what I really liked today was that how I envision it now is that with placing the treasure chest, it's like another point of connection, of coming back. So that actually would enable us maybe to create, to do, for example, a one measurement with the kids before we do like the grand opening of Captain Fanplastic, bringing these treasure chests. So we do it, I envision it that will be like a follow-up. But another thing what is happening is that obviously the book and the story there are so many, this is the base story, right, about the impact and the value of plastic, but there's so many different chapters that we can be developed around it. So once we have the whole ecosystem set up in South Africa, we're definitely looking into making follow-ups or adding chapters to the story that teach the children more things about the value or how they can change in their lives, etc. So that is certainly a goal. Now how it happens is often that we've done one at the school with school class, and then we come back for another class, and then we have obviously a small connection time with the old class, and now with the treasure chest. But that is something we definitely wanna, we wanna obviously continue that road of education.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Are there any other questions from the attendees?
Yes, I see one from Jenny. It's a very good point, and it's it's fair that you raise it. So it can be definitely anywhere. So obviously this pirate, Captain Fanplastic, he has a ship and he sails around, but he loves to enter land-based and find rivers or mountains or open fields, etc., where he can have an impact and can find as much plastic treasure as possible. What I do want to raise there is what I really enjoy as well about the program at the moment is that the treasure hunt feels like an excursion even for the kids, and especially for the schools that get the program sponsored. They're often public schools and often in townships or a little bit less privileged environments. Going to it's for us always like the dream to find a place that is in one hand exciting for the kids, on the other hand impactful, right? So we did with Bokmakiri Primary School in Athlone, we did a cleanup around the Black River, but it still was exciting because we went in buses and we went to the place, and we did the whole program around it, with all the treasure maps and the weighing of the treasure, etc. So it can definitely be in land-based. I like cleaning in the school can always be, but let's put it like this: I enjoy it to feel for the kids also as an excursion and make really something fun out of it. So if that opportunity is there, we will always pursue it.
We have another question from Alexi. Ruben.
Hi, Ruben. Me again. Just quick question. How much does this program cost? Say, for instance, if we wanted to get people to sponsor, or if someone wanted to get involved, what's the cost relation around it?
So it depends a little bit, but in general, in South Africa, we do it for 12,500 rand, and that includes facilitators, transport of the kids to location, photography, videography, if needed. But that's when you have like a bigger package. So there are multiple packages that we do. However, like you also know, we're always open to collaborate and to find a way that works for parties, because in the end we just want to find as much children as possible to facilitate to. But if companies want to sponsor the program, then it's 12.5 1,000 rand. Yeah, I think what is also important is that I talk now to a lot of corporates, and especially the bigger corporates. Often they have a little program themselves, or a big program that they run for themselves, right? And I'm always very big favor of seeing how we can combine our powers and to see how we can add on each other and to see if there is an integration possible. The one doesn't exclude the other. I would say sometimes it does, but not. But mostly there can be a plan, or we could do something around it. So that's something I think, like in general, when it comes to this topic, I think we should applaud everybody who's working on this and trying to change behavior and inspire people to and to act differently when it comes to plastic and pollution. So yeah, if companies or organizations need help to develop their own programs, or and want to make use of storytelling or the stuff I spoke about, like behavioral design, they can obviously contact me, or if you're interested in Captain Fanplastic, also please do, so that we can get those beaches clean and get those mountains clean and rivers, and we can enjoy beautiful South Africa nature.